Dear friends, won't repeat what has been said. Just want to make three basic points. One is that we have to be aware, of course, that a large majority of young people have not been convinced by the arguments to leave for a variety of reasons. Can't go into them now. I debate, argue, discuss with them in different ways, different parts of the country. But there is a general feeling amongst young people that somehow to be in the EU of itself, without taking anything else into consideration, is progressive. And that being out is to become very narrow-minded, very restrained, and of course what they largely see on the television screens is Michael Gove and Boris Johnson and this whole gang coming up with outrageous stuff. So it's been very difficult winning young people over, at least trying to neutralize them. Very painful, actually, because normally they are very eager to discuss, to debate, etc. So we have to recognize this. And I think many of them will not vote for a variety of reasons, but they are very nervous and unhappy about this campaign. One reason for this is that despite all the talk of the Europhile media, television, and the newspapers, who are completely uncritical of Europe, is that while they are completely uncritical now, if you look at their record over the last years, decades, the coverage of Europe in these papers is appalling, either of the European ruling class, or of the European working class, or of the European popular and social movements. So hardly any serious reporting by these Europhile newspapers of what is going on in Europe now. Our comrade from the CGT described what is happening in France. We see it on alternative bulletins, on the web, a huge struggle by the French working class against the new laws being imposed. What is the reporting and coverage of this in people who are very pro-Europe? Nil. Hardly anything. You saw a demonstration of 30 or 40,000 people yesterday or day before in Germany outside an American military base protesting against the use of that base to launch drone attacks in different parts of the world. Coverage of that in most of the press, especially the Europhile press, but in general, hardly anything. Discussion of what is going on in Portugal and Ireland, massive migration, emigration of young people who can't find jobs either in their countries or in Europe and are shifting continents again, hardly anything. So why don't they tell us what's happening in Europe under this paradise that they describe as the European Union, and which, if Britain were to leave, would suddenly create chaos, discontent, right-wing parties would come to power as if they are not already marching forward in different parts of Europe. Who do we have to thank for that? It's not Brexit or Britain leaving the EU. It's the actual functioning of the EU, which is not simply an anti-democratic organization. It is spreading anti-democratic currents in every single country in Europe. I mean, the very fact that the EU's current boss is Jean-Claude Juncker, a total charlatan and crook, who was involved in numerous scams in the tiny duchy of Luxembourg, which is where people went to avoid paying taxes. Not mentioned too much. Huge scandals amongst the French political elite, with it being released that Sarkozy, who decided to make war on Libya to get rid of Gaddafi, was actually on Gaddafi's payroll and taking money from Gaddafi to help win the elections. Mentioned in the French press, hardly ever discussed elsewhere. And we have to say that it's many of us on the left, many of us who are opposed to the EU, are opposed precisely because we follow what is happening in Europe as a whole, not just in Britain. And this EU is not simply bad for democracy in Britain, it is bad for democracy in Europe. It is hollowing out this democracy. The way it is functioning, it's destroying it. It wants to take power away from the trade unions. And some of the unions who collaborate with it, whether it's the TUC in this country or the CFDT in France, which has been playing an appalling role in this strike waves and pleading with the government not to make any concessions to the CGT. That is what is going on. Europe is in a complete crisis, a social, economic, cultural crisis. And who is going to deal with it? Another EU is possible. What other EU? All these people who go on from the left, since the left too is divided on this, their only argument is, yes, there are lots of problems with the present EU, but wait till Jeremy wins, or wait till X happens, and then we'll go in. But it'll be, the thing is, Jeremy might not win if we don't come out. And even if Jeremy were to win and implement even 2 or 3 planks from his program, they are not permitted to do so by EU rules and regulations. Nationalize the railways. They're trying to divide the railway system, as the comrade from France described, in France and in Germany and elsewhere. And they're going to sit back and say, okay, you can take the railways back. Just living in cuckoo land to imagine that this is what is going to happen. Somehow, I was debating Caroline Lucas, as Jane mentioned the other day, Europe is green. Green? With Volkswagen's scandals on emissions caught and exposed before the public eye, probably by their car rivals, big rival car companies in the United States. I mean, they all operate like this. They don't care a damn about the environment or anything else. Effectively, it is the struggle for profits. That has determined what capitalism does, is doing, and that is all that matters. Which is why the struggle against the European Union within Europe, there are other struggles outside Europe, is critically important. All the talk of a social Europe. The TUC, I remember it well, standing to its feet during the Thatcher era and singing before the Jacques Delors, the Social Democratic chairman at the time, in charge of the EU, and showing their love for him by singing Frère Jacques, which shocked him. He didn't know why they were singing the song. As well he might have been, but saying desperate, we are being crushed by Thatcher, help us. And of course they took advantage of this. But help there came none. And this is an absurd farce going on, which is indicating that all the rights won, social rights and political rights and economic rights, won by class and labor struggles and women's struggles in this country, are all a gift of the EU. For God's sake, it didn't even exist for most of this period. Now, what are the advantages of leaving the EU for Britain? It's not that Britain will somehow suddenly get better. No, that has to be fought for. But you create the basis for improving it by electing a government which promises to support many of the demands which people want. They want nationalization of the railways. They want many of the utilities taken back. It's a long struggle. Privatization was not fought against by the British trade union movement after the defeat of the miners' strike. That's a fact. Whereas trade unions and non-trade unionists in countries like Peru and Bolivia, through mass popular struggles, prevented the privatization of electricity in the villages in Peru, fought for and won back the nationalization of water in large cities in Bolivia. Something that unorganized, not that politicized in the normal sense of the word, people managed to do, could not be done by the trade union movement in this country, and then it capitulated effectively to Blair and Mandelson and that gang, who have little in common with anything the labor movement stands for.
Tariq, can you come?
And that is one of the problems, and let's mention it, that one of the problems Jeremy confronts, I agree with what the comrade from the RMT said, they should have come out and opposed this nonsense, said it's a free vote. It can be a free vote on bombing Syria, why not a free vote on getting out of the EU? So they should have done that. But one reason is that the party, the Labour Party, let's have no illusions, is packed with Blairites. Half of them were desperate to be fighting together with Cameron against the evil hordes who want us to come out of the EU. That's the scale of the problem. That's where the attacks are coming from. And Lindsey was absolutely right. Whatever happens on the day of the referendum, in or out, we will not have an easy time of it. We will have to fight, we will have to organize, we will have to try and unite the left as best we can with the best, most militant sections of the labor movement. Because this is what they did in Scotland. They lost the referendum, but there were mass mobilizations immediately afterwards, tens of thousands of people. Our level of mobilization in this referendum has not been what the Scottish mobilization was, but mobilize we will have to do whatever happens if we are to move forward in this country.
Thank you, Tariq.